name is Bill Keogh. I'm the managing director of the Supply Chain, Transportation, and Logistics Master's Program here at the University of Washington. We're delighted to have you join us here tonight. With us tonight are three program alums who are going to tell you a little bit about their experience with the program, what sort of impact it's had for them. But before I go ahead and introduce them, I'd like to point you to a resource that might be valuable to you as you move forward in your career. Whether you decide the program is a fit for you or not, it's good to know what kind of resources are out there. A lot of instructors in the program work closely with students when they want to make a transition or sometimes when they lose their job, that sort of thing, and provide a lot of advice about what's the best way to go about doing that. One question I've got frequently from students is, I have a job offer, but they're offering me a salary that I don't think is right. So how do I negotiate a higher salary with these guys? And one of the things I always tell people is get some data. If you have hard data, that helps you in terms of your negotiating position. So I wanted to point you at a resource. Ken, maybe you could pop that up. So this is a salary guide that's produced by a company called Agilon once a year. And if you are in the job market, like everybody is, I suppose, this is a great resource for you. We'll put the URL for this in the chat. But this is an example of the kind of resources we want to make available to you to help you sort of get ahead in your career. So in any event, why don't we go ahead and get started? I will allow our alums to introduce themselves, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation, and then we'll also have an opportunity for you to ask questions, specific to your situation or to the program in general. Alea, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Alea Reidinger, class of 2018. I'm currently with the Clorox company down here in the Bay Area in a group called Enable Innovation. I've been with Clorox about 8 years, was on active duty prior to that, all in the logistics and supply chain fields. And so yeah, that's me. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a senior program manager at Amazon on a Whole Foods delivery team. I graduated from the program in 2019, and prior to Amazon, I was in the Marine Corps as well in a supply chain logistics role. Brian?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, I'm Brian Haun. I'm also graduated in 2019 from the program. I'm currently a logistics manager on the Starbucks transportation team. Previous to this, I was also in the U.S. Army working in logistics as well. So thank you for joining our call.
Okay, great. Well, first off, guys, thank you all for joining. It's so nice to see your faces again. So why don't we just kick it off? This will be an informal conversation, but I think a first question that might be interesting to people is, what made you choose the SCTL program in the first place?
I can start. So for me personally, there's always this conversation of, do I want an MBA? Do I not want an MBA? What else is out there? I had previously already taken a certificate of business administration program through University of Washington, and it didn't really appeal to me in the way that the SCTL program did. I knew I wanted to stay in the logistics focused areas, and it just felt like the SCTL program really just provided that additional breadth and depth of experience where maybe from my previous experiences at Clorox and in the Marine Corps, just kind of filled those gaps a little bit better for me.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what Alea said, I think for me, like Chris and Alea, we had a lot of experience in the logistics, but sort of on-the-job type training. And what this program really allowed to do is, what else is out there in the supply chain, transportation? It's kind of this big, huge thing, and it really allowed to see other concepts, to see what other things are out there, to really add on to sort of that on-the-job type training that I got in the military as well as in the private sector.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I think I was looking for a couple things. I was transitioning out of the military when I applied to the program. I also applied to a couple full-time MBA programs. In between the time that all the programs started, I got a job offer from Amazon, and so I knew I wanted to take that job, and so this one definitely I felt was going to provide me the opportunity to be able to work and go to school without like reasonably, and also I was looking for something that would, one, help me myself take the skills that I learned and apply it in the Marine Corps and apply it to the corporate world and help connect the dots for me that way. But also I was pretty interested in like identifying myself into one particular category versus like an MBA is a much broader uh, brushstroke where I sort of wanted to start creating an identity for myself, and supply chain logistics was kind of where I wanted to center myself at.
Great, great, thanks. You sort of alluded to this, Chris, but if you think about, for a lot of people, the whole idea of embarking on a graduate degree, especially if you haven't been in school for 10 years, you can wonder, how am I going to make this work with my life, right? We just had a baby. I'm flying to China all the time, back when you could go places. And so could you think about that a little bit? How did you make this work with your life? I mean, the program's designed to be work compatible, right? So we have live classes from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific for the whole 2 years. But nevertheless, there's a lot of work outside. Could you guys talk a little bit about your experience there?
Sure, I can start. I had a really good experience with that. So I was in a job when I got accepted, not through the application process. So I had open conversations with my manager about it immediately before it started, was even able to not take PTO for the week we were on campus, and got that covered for me as like a educational opportunity type deal. But really the online portion of this, I forget the name of the program that we use, but I traveled for work several times. It required me to be up at like midnight, but I was still able to connect, go to class. The workload is pretty reasonable on a week-to-week basis. So you can kind of, and the deadlines they're hard, but they're not, you usually have a plenty of time to get ahead and not have to do it at a specific time or specific date. There's no online test that's like Friday at 5 o'clock, you have to take this or anything like that. So it allows a lot of flexibility. I also think the instructors, the majority of them work full time as well. So there's a level of empathy that gets applied to you as a student that may not exist in other programs.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to add, I couldn't agree more. Having a really supportive manager was really key for me and my success in the program. Similar to Chris, I was able to take just personal leave versus vacation, which was really helpful. And then in general, just because Clorox is a little unique, we have a dual headquarters, so work kind of tapers off on the West Coast around 1 o'clock. Then that gives me time to do West Coast work. But I was able to always end a little bit earlier and just maybe catch up on reading, or make sure that I have like dedicated 30 minutes, 45 minutes to work on projects while at work. So it just seemed like that's where I was able to focus first coming home and just kind of being all wrapped up in end of the day activities. So having that flexibility to get stuff done while technically like at work was really helpful too.
Great.
Yeah, just to reiterate, yeah, I think the first step is just working with your direct manager. I know that was really helpful for me as well. And just, I had a similar experience to Alea and Chris, and I think it's really prepared, me now for what the current work environment, working from home, the kind of that in the office from 8 to 5, but now it's just about, this is the work we need to get done. When you get it done is sort of on you and the coordination, especially, with the group projects, things like that. It was hard for us to physically get together, but we kind of were able to, assign tasks, things like that in order to get the projects done. So I think it actually set up really well. Not great that there's a pandemic by any means, but I think it's set up, to not be the virtual environment, and working with the team to get stuff done, reach milestones, things like that, was not a foreign concept.
Yeah, that was one thing for us that not a positive, but when the pandemic hit and everybody was like, oh no, we can't meet in person, it didn't affect us at all. We just went on with sort of business as usual. I think when you think about the online learning environment, in my experience, in different programs, online means a lot of different things, right? Sometimes it means, there's a platform and you download an assignment and you complete it and maybe you watch a video or something. But in some environments, you don't really interact with other people, like not even the way we're doing here. And for me, I think at the graduate level, like the job of the instructor is different than at the undergrad level, right? Where the instructor sits there and talks to you and you take notes and that kind of thing. Here, everybody in the program has pretty deep experience in some area of supply chain or logistics. And so during a lot of the live classes, the instructor is kind of facilitating the conversation where Chris goes, I mean, I know when I teach the IT class and we talk about ERP systems and that sort of thing, and it's like, well, it's supposed to be like this. And then Chris goes, yeah, I know it's supposed to be like that. Let me tell you what happened when we tried to do that. So it's very real world experience, and the students have an opportunity to share and to learn from one another. So having the live courses and also having the asynchronous content that you can watch whenever you want. And Chris, you were talking about that. Any thoughts you'd like to share with people about your experience with online learning like this?
Yeah, I can kind of go. Yeah, for me, I had never done online learning. I think, kind of Bill, you hit on a little bit, you've heard about just, make sure you read this and then post on, Canvas. And that's sort of the interaction for the day. Watch the video of the professor, and I think that was I've heard, horror stories about other programs. And I think for me, it was, incredibly interactive and was, even more than I was expecting. I think it starts off well with the residency week, just to get that first sort of initial camaraderie, just to at least assign, a name to the face that you'll see online. But for me, it was, a lot more interactive than even I was expecting. I think that's through the technology, and the facilitation of the technology, breakout rooms, things like that, and then having that, just that ability to interact with some even more than I was expecting from what you would traditionally think of an online learning environment, which is, hey, read this, post online, and then watch, lecture. And it was not that at all. It was much more collaborative, I would say, just as much, if not more, than an in-person learning type environment.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, and I just added, it's especially helpful for folks that are, not local to the Seattle area. So even if, say, practicum teams that were local were able to meet up and work on things, myself and my two team members, shout out to Matt and Renee, we were still able to connect virtually. And I think that was just as valuable as if we were able to meet face to face.
Great.
So Bill, we have some questions coming in.
Okay. All right. So why don't we, I have some other questions, but I think if you're watching this, your questions are more important than mine. So why don't we'll just kind of go in order. From Ashkan, what does being a logistics program manager look like in a common work day? I guess sort of what do you do? Maybe that's the essence of it. Kind of what does that job look like in terms of what do you do every day? And Chris, I guess that's to you, I guess.
I'm gonna let Brian, the global transportation manager, tackle that one.
There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not a program manager, but, kind of as a logistics manager, I think you kind of want to balance as a manager, you want to balance between the tactical day-to-day, what is the issue of the day at, at Starbucks and, obviously at Clorox and Amazon. I'm sure it's a complicated supply chain. There's, thousands of different things, thousands of shipments always going on. So you want to make sure you're staying engaged with sort of what is that, thing that's going on. This shipment was delayed. This facility was broken down. What are those things there? At the end of the day, logistics supply, it's getting stuff where it needs to be, when it needs to be there, as a simplistic way to look at it. But, what are those issues and tackling those issues, but then also thinking, strategically, how are we going to be different 6 months, a year from now? How are we going to get better? A lot of times it is learning from those day-to-day issues that you have. What you as a manager, what are you going to do to try to prevent those moving forward? It's fine to make mistakes, but, you try to not make the same mistake, twice or three times. How do you learn from that and work with your team? It's not, if it's never you as a manager just going and making decisions, creating, countermeasures, things like that. It's working amongst your team and cross-functionally to put in those countermeasures to understand the root cause of an issue. And then once you're able to do that, it's easy to put in fixes. It's getting to the actual root cause of an issue, and I think as a manager, it's your job to facilitate that environment to get to root cause and have that continuous improvement mindset kind of across the board. So I don't know if that, completely answers your question, but that's sort of, that's
It was a good answer. Great. Let's see. So a couple of sort of practical questions. How long is the program? So the program is 2 years. And you'll be taking courses pretty much that entire time. There's a little break here and there. What certification will I earn? So what you'll earn is a master's degree. So you will have a degree from the University of Washington, a master's degree in supply chain, transportation, and logistics. Let's see, I worked okay, yeah, I work full-time as a supply chain manager. How many hours a week or a day do I have to spend studying? I'll give you my 2 cents and then you can listen to these guys. People always ask this question, and not to give the consultant answer, but in this instance, it really does depend. The program has courses. We try to offer courses that expose you to like all the key functions in the supply chain that are related to each other, right? Because if you make a change in inventory, that's probably going to change your transportation strategy, your sort of financial metrics, that sort of thing. Some students come in and they know a lot about inventory. If that's the case, the inventory class is probably not going to be that hard for you. Some students come in and go, oh, I know absolutely nothing about IT. That class is probably going to be more work for you. So there's no clear answer. It kind of depends on your background, but let me let you guys speak to that since you were the actual students.
I think it's also a function of like, how much do you really want to know about each topic and module? For example, I thought I knew information systems. I thought I had a good idea what SAP was. I didn't truly have an appreciation for what our ERP system was until Bill's class. So I was all up in the weeds on trying to like really understand and connect back to how operations work at Clorox. So I think it was just totally valuable, and I was able to find ways to directly apply each quarter's learnings to things that I was doing every day.
I guess I'll take a little bit more of a like numbers approach to this. You're going to take 1 class a quarter, which compared to like an MBA program might be 2 classes a quarter for 2 years. UW's nighttime MBA program is actually 3 years, where this is 2. So from a comparative standpoint, class load, workload is probably a little bit less than some of the other ones. If I was going to give you a rough estimate of how much time I spent every week, this may highlight how efficient or inefficient of a student I was. I would carve out 10 hours a week. I think that's a pretty safe number. But Brian, Alea, if you have something different, chime in.
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Like, yeah, sometimes more, some weeks less, some weeks more, but I think 10 hours is a good baseline and should cover a majority of the weeks.
Yeah,
Great.
I would agree with that.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, another question. I'm a Canadian citizen. Should I apply for a student visa for this program? So the answer is this year, normally we do the residency. It's 1 week. You come to the UW campus. You spend the whole week there meeting the cohort, having cocktails with our advisory board, that sort of thing. This year, obviously, we were unable to do that due to COVID. What we're going to do for the coming year, this September, 3rd week in September, what we're going to do is do kind of a hybrid model, because some people still aren't comfortable, coming back and, kind of being on campus. So we're going to offer both options. There's going to be an option to come in person, and there's also going to be an option to participate online. For people who need visas to come to campus for a week, there are some challenges with the way the government looks at student visas. So if you can't come on a tourist visa because you're not really a tourist, but a student visa, they don't issue student visas for 1 week. So it's sort of kind of a weird situation. However, if you're a citizen of another country and you want to participate in the program, you can do the practicum remotely and then proceed through the rest of the program exactly the same way as everybody else. Let's see, can you say something about course content and real life experience? Well, for me, I mean, I'm a consultant. I'm not coming from an academic background, and virtually everyone who teaches is a practitioner. One person from the business school, but he had a lot of work experience. And then Anne worked as Anne Goodchild, who's the academic director, worked as a consultant with PwC before moving into academia. Everybody else who's teaching has been doing whatever they're teaching for like 25 or 30 years. And all of them are still doing it. The person who teaches the freight transport class, he's a consultant working with companies all the time. I'm a consultant. I'm helping a company now pick an ERP system. The person who teaches finance has been in mergers and acquisitions for a long time. So and I'll let you guys speak to this, but I think one of the things about the program that's different than some other programs is it's not taught by people who are like professors who've been in academia for 10 years and haven't worked with a client for 10 years. So you're getting people who are out there, and because I mean the supply chain is changing really fast, as everybody knows. If you're not plugged in there doing actual work in the real world, it's a little bit hard to know what exactly, what sort of advice to give to students or what sort of subjects to cover. I'll let you guys chime in on that for your opinions.
Sure. I thought that was maybe one of the highlights of the class is that for the most part, every class had a practical application from the standpoint of you were getting the material presented to you away with current experiences that the professor was having, but also like I think just graduate programs in general. A lot of people, at least in this particular class, have work experience and we're currently working. So you're bringing in all of their experience to the classes as well, and they're discussing how the knowledge is applying to them and how they're utilizing it each and every day, whether it's at Boeing or Amazon or Clorox and things like that. So I thought the relevancy of the material was constantly at the forefront of the classes because the professors and the students were in a working environment near or around the industry.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Chris was saying. I think one thing that really helped me in my development, coming from the military into corporate world was, how do you sort of present to senior leaders, how do you get that information across quickly, but still be able to get your point across, and I think that was really helpful. And the teachers, the professors, as well as just other students in the class had tons of experience that they were able to share of this is how you can just, you can get 15 minutes, present a slide deck potentially to a VP or a director, and able to get it and get your point across, which is a skill, it's not easy to do. And I think it was really helpful. That was where it was really helpful for me. And you kind of see what has worked in the industry with people who've been on the other side of the table in, director, VP type roles. So for me.
Great. So back to the real life experience, how interactive is the virtual platform in applying, for example, ERP, SAP? So I can give my answer and then you guys can chime in as you like. I teach the IT systems class. And so one of the focuses, this is, we started with some people who don't know anything and other people who are more conversant with information technology. But one of the key things we do is ERP systems, right? What is it? How does it work? And then we get down to if your company has 7 ERP systems, what does that mean? And what do you do? And what problems arise? And what solutions exist? In my class, this is a hard thing. We like to give people like hands-on experience, right? Because it's one thing for me to tell you yada, yada, yada. Maybe you remember it, maybe you don't. I know for me personally, if I have to actually do something myself, I tend to remember what it is. And so we try to bring that to the classes. In my IT class, we play a game that's like it's a sort of a simulated supply chain game where different teams have different roles. And they're kind of buying from each other and trying to figure out how much to buy and all that good stuff. And initially they're doing purchase orders over email, et cetera, the way some companies do. And there's some challenges with that from a technology perspective. In like the third or fourth week, the students implement an actual, light ERP system, but it's a real thing. It's used by commercial clients all over the place. They put their inventory in, they cut purchase orders out of it, et cetera. So for me, that's the closest thing you can get to actually, doing SAP in your job, for example. So hopefully that answered that question. I already have a certificate in supply chain management and have experience in procurement engineering, but was not lucky enough to find a job in the supply chain or procurement field. Can I have some advice, and if it is necessary to take this program? Well, so obviously at the end of the day, only you can decide what is necessary for you. What I would say, and then maybe you guys could speak to this as well, this program basically has one objective. The objective of this program is to help you out, help you graduate, get a more senior job, make more money, and have a more satisfying career. And I think if you look at the data, you can look on the front of the MSCTL website, 80% are making more than 100, 25% are making more than 200. Not that everything is about money, but money is important. And I think the key to this partially is the program's great academically, but I think there's a very serious component of building a professional network. Somebody who can introduce you to somebody else. You can have a drink with the COO of Amazon Robotics. Building out that network for me is really what helps you get a job. You can apply online to stuff for 6 months and never get a response at all. But if Chris puts in a call and says, hey, somebody's going to send you a resume, please look at it, that's different. Let me let you guys talk about that aspect.
So I guess I'll propose an alternate scenario where I guess I could say I didn't take advantage of maybe the network opportunities as I could have. And with Clorox, I'm happy to be with Clorox. I'm not looking to drastically make that kind of career change, but what this program has allowed me to do is be considered for opportunities I wouldn't normally have been considered for because of the breadth and some of the depth of experience that this program offers. For example, the group I'm in now, Enable Innovation at Clorox, it's a very small group. I think I'm the most junior person, and I think it was really this program that I was able to demonstrate, like, look, I can bring to the table as much value as someone that has 30 years of experience in the industry. So it's that kind of thing that this program really helped me do. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of networking opportunities out there, and take advantage of them if they're available.
Great.
Yeah, completely agree with what Alea said. And just one other thing I would say is, if you're looking to get into an industry or, applying for a job, when you do get to that interview, at the end of the day, it's how can you bring value, and sort of be better than the other person, especially in a tough market. I think this program, even if you're not working directly, in the field at the moment, it still allows you to provide, examples of how, how you can solve problems, what you've done, in real world experience, and not, reading a textbook and then up solving that problem. It's, at this company, hey, I was helped to do this or that, but it still allows you to move forward with gaining that supply chain experience, even if you are not working in the field at the moment.
Yeah, a couple more comments. I think that if supply chain logistics is a field that you want to be in, whether you're currently in it or not, this is a great degree for you because you're going to be surrounded by 40 other people and led by people in the industry and who also want to be into it. From a networking standpoint, I can tell you that Lauren Seeks, who I think is probably still the golden child of the program.
Tell him who he is.
He's a director at Convoy right now, which is a multi-billion-dollar startup in Seattle that's sort of revolutionizing the transportation freight network. But he graduated, I think, in 2017 or 2018, and I was in 2000. He must have graduated in maybe 17.
Yeah.
Anyways, at our first week on campus, he was there when I started in 2017. I met with him and we kept in contact. He ultimately referred me for a job at Convoy, which I interviewed for. They offered me a job, but it wasn't in Seattle, it was in Atlanta, so I turned it down. Another example would be Adam Loxo, who graduated in 2018 from the program, reached out to me when about a year ago, and was looking for a job at Amazon. I referred him to a role, and he's now managing a transportation team out of Phoenix, Arizona for Amazon. So just a couple examples there. There's probably others. It certainly doesn't work out for everybody, but you're going to increase your odds. You're not going to hurt yourself.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different resources from a networking and sort of job finding position you can avail yourself of. I think one thing, and you guys can, comment on this too, but I think one of the things that's different about this program is like the instructors they see you every week for a long time. And I think we know our students a lot better than you may see, even in some face-to-face programs, like people tell me when they're having a baby, or I had one woman one time say, I feel really bad. I can't be in class tonight, but I'm on my honeymoon. I'm like, you're on your honeymoon. Are you out of your mind? Don't come to class. Have your honeymoon, But it's that kind of thing. And I remember with Lauren, I remember when he was at Starbucks, I think, and he called me up and he goes, hey, I have this opportunity with this startup. And I knew his wife was having a baby. And I'm like, Lauren, is your wife on board with this, the whole startup thing? He was like, yeah. And so I remember talking to him, and he was like the fifth or sixth employee there, something like that. And what, they got 5,000 now? And I remember him asking me, so I'm going to go interview with the CEO. Like, what should I ask him? Because he'd never, gone. And I've done a certain amount of work in the startup space. I'm like, what have they done? Who's funding them? What's your burn rate? Like all this stuff. And afterwards, he called me back and he said, they said, wow, you've asked more questions than anybody else we've had come in here. So I think that's an example of the sort of, the sort of support you can get from, people in the faculty, people on the board, and our alums. We have like 200 and something alums now. And we actually have several of them on the chat, Edwin and Jaya. This is, again, a tight community of people who work all over the world in all sorts of different supply chain roles. And anyone, if you're in the program, any one of these people will take your phone call. So you can really leverage that network. Yeah, I said I was going to let you talk, and then all I did was talk. Do you guys have anything to add to that? Or if not, I can look at the next question. Let's see. I'm graduating from a college in Toronto with a 4.0 GPA. Good for you. I have previous work experience in oil and gas supply chain. I'm wondering if I will be eligible for this program. Well, so having a 4.0, that's a good start. If you worked in supply chain and oil and gas, that's oil and gas. I used to live in Houston. Oil and gas has some very interesting supply chain challenges. Let me make this suggestion. If you go, I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit about what are your current career objectives and figure out if this is right for you. If you go to the SCTL homepage, there's a place and it says like book a call. You can book a call with me. We'll get on the phone or get on Zoom and talk. Okay. Let me throw another question out there if I could. If you think about the program, like what did you take away as sort of the most impactful experience, from the program when you were in it?
I'll take a shot at this one. And I think it kind of goes back to the practical application for me. That was question that was asked earlier, like what about what level of practical application is there in this program? And there's so much practical application outside of the program to this degree that you might not be noticing now. I remember like sitting on the bus, and I live in West Seattle, so we would go across the West Seattle Bridge, which goes by the Port of Seattle, every single day on my way to work. And the way I would look at what was going on there, or the way I look at like infrastructure in general, again, living in West Seattle with this bridge being down and how they're rerouting traffic. Like, I think the biggest impact to me was like really gaining a clear was how much it increased, like how much time I spent thinking about logistics, transportation, and supply chain. And then from that, understanding how much of my daily life is impacted by it, I think was probably my biggest takeaway.
Cool.
I would add, there really hasn't been like one most impactful experience. There's been any number of small impacts, like I already mentioned, like the SAP example. Like this program just really made me understand just how my own company works. And I think from that perspective, you're just able to add so much value because you're able to just kind of see things in a different light, apply what you're learning to everyday occurrences, improve processes. And even now, when I look back and in the moment, I was convinced that facilities planning and design would not ever be a topic that affects my daily life. It is now. We're standing up a brand new supply chain, which I can't get into details about, but it's a conversation that we're having. How is this equipment going in? How are the materials flowing? So it's just surprising to me that even now, 2 years, 3 years later, that I'm just drawing on just all the learning and all the experiences from fellow classmates on, helping me do what I'm doing today.
Great.
Yeah, I think for me, no single experience I would say, but what really stands out is kind of that, as a result of the program, that ability to kind of push the envelope a little bit, because you have so many different professors and students in the program, that have different companies, have worked on different projects and seen things that work and don't work, but it kind of allows you to take that back to, your current role, and allowed me to, is kind of to ask questions that maybe weren't asked before, or, hey, this is how we've always done it, so this is how we continue to do it. But just look at things differently. But then you also have, and it's not just me, thinking outside the, trying to sound cool or anything, but it's like, no, this has worked at other companies, and sort of it just allowing that to ask different questions and to look at things differently than maybe some other companies have before.
Great. Yeah, and I mean, in talking about the practicality of the program, in terms of the last course of the program is a practicum, and it might be interesting to talk about that for a minute because it's much different than the other courses. And for me, the objective of getting students out who can get better jobs, if you think about the people who get promoted, they're not the people who sit at their desk and go, what should I do next, right? They're the people who look at a problem and go, we could improve that process, or we're wasting a lot of money there, or why aren't we delivering on time to our customers? The people who can identify a problem, figure out a way to fix it, and then actually fix it. And so the idea of the practicum is students work in teams of 3, and they pick a real problem, like Alea picked a real problem from her environment, and her team worked on it. And you have to figure out, each team works with one professor, and the professor helps guide and scope the problem. But then, is this possible? How much money would it cost? What kind of resources do I need? What sort of risks are there? What kind of technology is there? What sort of internal sales would I have to do to get different entities on board? What's the return on investment? And the final activity is you get 10 slides and 20 minutes, and you pitch your solution to panels of people from our advisory board. And the advisory board, they're really senior people. John Thielen runs the transportation for Costco, all over the whole world, people like that. And these people sit there and decide, yeah, I would fund that project, or no, I wouldn't fund that project. And that's the way your success is measured. That is about as real as it gets. And I've had plenty of people come back afterwards and go, maybe 2 years later, I did that exact thing. And my second line manager said, okay, give that person 300 grand in 6 months and let's see what happens. So it's a real experience. I'd like to hear your guys' perspectives as well on the practicum.
Yeah, I think for the practicum, for me, it was, I'll be honest, during that time, I was transitioning jobs as well as my son was being born. So it was quite, getting back to the original, how do you manage it all? It's definitely manageable. I can attest to that. But, I think for me, it was probably the best thing was just being, being able to present to essentially a CEO level. You know, that, like as Bill mentioned, there are some people up there that are very high level, and it really forces you to really narrow in on what are you trying to solve and what are you and what are you trying to do, and it's that to me was sort of the takeaway from the practicum. Sometimes when you try to present these things, you think you have to cover, so many different things, and then all of a sudden your slide is a million different bullet points that nobody knows what it's trying to do, but it really focuses in on, this is what the problem I'm trying to solve, this is the value it will bring, and this is what I need. At the end of the day, it seems simple, but it's really hard. And, I think it can separate people in the, as you move throughout the career, but being able to sort of gain confidence and apply the same logic to projects moving forward has been really helpful for me.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the idea was to mimic real life, right? And in real life, you get 20 minutes and 10 slides with the VP of supply chain. And if you can't build your case, then that's it. And so this is designed to replicate that experience. Let me ask another question. So what advice would you have for future students or people who are contemplating entering the program, having been through the whole thing end to end and having graduated successfully? What advice might you give to somebody contemplating the program?
I would give the advice of, I think for like future classes compared to say our classes, the idea of meeting in environments like this will be much more common practice, and people will be much more comfortable with it than even we were at the time, because of this past year. And there's a ton of more resources and tools have gotten better. But I think my advice would be like, don't let that type of stuff like get in your way from interacting with people and utilizing your resources. Like, there's a ton of students in the class that have experience. There's a ton of professors in the class that have the experience, and you can certainly go through the program with minimal interaction with all of them and do just fine from an academic standpoint. But the value, the value after the program is over really comes from those type of personal connections, the real life experiences, scenarios that people have gone through, and listening to them, how they solve problems and things like that. Like, I think I did an okay job at it. But I think I could have done a better job at connecting with classmates and really like taking the opportunity to expand my knowledge base through like learning through other people.
Great.
I don't know if this is like great advice. I don't even know if I'd call it advice. I mean, as the saying goes, if it were easy, everyone would do it. So it's not without effort, right? So you get out what you put into it. I think the program is great for folks that are trying to stay or expand their experience in the supply chain field. It's probably not the best thing if you're trying to go for something like marketing or whatever other function, sales. But it's definitely doable. I didn't have some of the demands that are currently in my life now as they were when I was in the program. So maybe life was easier back then. So it's not as challenging. Didn't have a baby, just have a really needy dog and cat. But yeah, so it's worth it if this is where you think your career is going.
Great, thanks, Alea. Okay, well, let's. I'd like to ask one more question. This is just sort of a roll-up question, but if you think about your career development and you think about the, sort of the experience you had in the program, academic, networking, that kind of thing, are there one or two things in particular that sort of where you can see kind of a career impact based on your participation in the program? Is there one or two things that really helped you from a career perspective?
I think for me, the biggest thing is just, being able to talk amongst different groups and understand sort of the, understand where they're coming from. You know, I work in transportation, but obviously we work a lot with manufacturing. We work a lot with our distribution teams. But, you know, obviously I'm not going to be a subject matter expert in every single one of their respective areas, but I can, you know, just through the program sort of know what is important to them, what challenges are they facing, you know, how does it all kind of roll together. It's been really helpful just as a way to get things done. You know, if you only approach it from one perspective of the overall supply chain, you know, whether it be transportation or anything like that, you're not going to have a ton of success. Whereas if you can understand sort of the impact across the entire chain is going to allow you to get a whole lot more done and make a whole lot more impact.
Yeah, because I think most of the nasty problems in supply chain, they're not within procurement, right? Like the really bad problems go across multiple different functions. And that's why they're bad problems, because they're hard to fix. And that's where understanding each one of the functions and sort of root causes and that kind of stuff, it's certainly helpful.
Definitely.
For me, so I was working in supply chain and logistics in the Marine Corps right up until I started this program, and then transitioned to a role at Amazon where I was working on like a very niche team, Amazon Treasure Truck, and doing route optimization. And then I transferred over to Amazon Whole Foods and currently own the shopper process space. So from the time a customer orders a groceries online, from the time our in-store shoppers accept that order to the time that they hand it to a delivery driver to be delivered, my team owns that process, picking things off the shelf and things like that. So what this has allowed for me to do is have like very like direct and intelligent conversations, both down the supply chain for us, or logistics network, which would be our flex drivers and the flex team, and then also up the supply chain, which would be with Whole Foods, who's bringing in the produce to the store, right? So as a recent example, there's a bunch of winter storms that basically hit the entire network and disrupted supply chains for probably every industry. But for me, I was focused on the grocery industry. So we immediately noticed we started getting like more concessions from customers around rotten and expired produce. And so we were able to ask the question like, hey, Whole Foods, like, what's your supply chain disruption look like? When do you expect to have it back on track? And like, oh, we expect to have, you know, this and this within 2 weeks. But then they use DCs too, right? So we actually, our customers were impacted for 4 weeks, even though Whole Foods might have only been impacted for 2, because the whole supply chain had to get back on track. So it allows us, my team, to personally plan around, okay, here's when we can expect an increase or a spike in customer concessions. How is that going to affect our bottom line and our top line going into this year, and things like that. So some pretty really direct and serious conversations, and a real good understanding from me to be able to like make, you know, top and bottom line revenue projections based on supply chains is pretty neat and
Great.
really unexpected, I guess.
Thanks. Okay. Well, yeah, we don't have any more. If you have any more questions, do them quickly. We don't seem to have any more questions from the audience. Any parting thoughts? You guys have been super generous with your time, and I really appreciate you sharing all your different experiences. Cool. Okay.
Is if you're interested, you know, reach out on the website. Like I said, and Bill said you can have a call or just, learn more if you think it's for you. But I think that there's definitely value of supply chain or logistics, you know, or something you're interested in. The value is clear for the program.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, Brian, Chris, Alea, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your insights.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bill.